It is 6:01, so I'd like to call the December 12th, 2024 meeting of the Capital Improvements Program meeting to order. If we could all rise and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Jake, could you lead us in that?
Oh, jeez. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. All right, so good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's meeting of the CIP Committee. My name is Jeff Penta, and I serve as the chair of the committee. Thank you all for taking the time to join us as we continue this important work of planning and prioritizing investments that will shape the future of Londonderry. Tonight, just a brief overview of the agenda. We'll begin with the overview of the Capital Improvements Program, what it is, so it sets the stage for our discussions. Following that, we'll move to some administrative work of approving our meeting minutes from June 26th. We'll then hear project overviews and presentations from key departments, including the Department of Public Works and the school district. These presentations are aimed to provide a crucial context for our deliberations later in this meeting. Afterward, we'll open the floor for public comment, offering an opportunity for residents to share their thoughts. We'll then transition to the FY 26-2031 CIP committee deliberations, where we'll focus on scoring, prioritizing, and placing projects in a way that reflects our town's needs and financial strategy. Finally, we'll address our other business by adjourning for the evening. As we continue through the agenda, I encourage everyone to participate thoughtfully and respectfully, keeping our shared goals of responsible planning and fiscal stewardship in mind. So with that introduction in hand.
Mr. Chair, could I just, this is recorded, just to confirm for you.
Excellent, thank you, Kelly, I appreciate it. It's not live though, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so let's transition into the Capital Improvements Program overview. So the Planning Board under RSA 674:5 is responsible for preparing and annually updating Londonderry's CIP program plan. The 6-year plan identifies and prioritizes municipal projects and their costs, providing a roadmap to address current deficiencies and a plan for future growth. The CIP is an advisory document, underlined advisory document, designed to guide our budgeting, which, assisting our town council, school board, and budget committee in financial planning. Stabilizing our taxes promotes predictable property tax rates by smoothing expenditures, coordinate projects, align priorities and sequences improvements efficiently, and most importantly, inform the community, provide transparency for residents, business, and developers. The CIP committee develops a plan for planning board review. Once that's finalized, the planning board adopts the CIP and forwards it to the town council and school board for consideration as an advisory document. This process ensures Londonderry's capital planning is strategic, transparent, and aligned with the evolving needs of our community. So again, I just want to thank you all for your participation in this annual and important endeavor. That said, do I have a motion to accept the minutes from June 26, 2024?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstain?
Excellent. So, four ayes, one abstain.
Yep, I wasn't here.
Thank you. All right. If we don't mind, we're gonna switch the agenda around. I know the agenda has the school kind of going first, but I'd like just to have the opportunity to invite the DPW to present first. So Dave, if you could take the podium.
This first one, Dave?
Mr. Wally, good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Dave Wally. I'm your Director of Public Works and Municipal Facilities. And with me this evening is Daniel Tenney, who works for our engineering firm consultant group, Weston and Sampson. There's a lot to unpack here, and I'll try to be brief and move it along as quickly as I can.
Should work, yep.
Okay. So we've been working on this master plan spatial analysis of our facility, or lack thereof, at the site on High Range Road. And what you're going to see tonight is a concept of making the property more user-friendly. First of all, doing a complete site overhaul, whereas there is no stormwater detention, there's no drainage. A lot of the pavement is failing and/or there is no paving. There's a lot of concerns for circulation on the property itself, and there is no actual facility for equipment in any kind. We have a one-stall shop garage, if you will, that was built in 1970, and I'll go through some of this stuff now. So here, you're going to see the existing conditions laid out across the property. There's a little over 11 acres there, but we utilize less than that, less than half of that. And there's really no rhyme or reason to where the structures are. So circulation and then material piles are, you're crossing back and forth across the property quite a bit. We have a one-stall bay garage, if you will, that is vastly small for the size of the equipment that we have today. In fact, one of the two doors, we can't even drive through it because it's too small. So we have to frequently back our larger equipment in and out of. We have two salt sheds, one that was built in the late 70s and then expanded in the 80s, and then the next structure, or the newer, larger one, was built about 10 years after that. So the original salt shed, if you will, was built some time ago in the late 70s, and that's what we use for just a sand salt mix at this time. So I'll go through a little more existing photos. I've done a presentation on existing conditions before, so I'll try to kind of be brief in this in that regard. Here's just a panoramic view of the overall property, similar to what was just illustrated in the last slide. And in 2014, and then occupied in the very beginning of 2015, in the top left corner is the current administration building, if you will, or employee building, which has a small break room, small locker room, and kitchen area. You see there on the top left slide the single bay structure that was built in 1970, and the interior of it on the right, and that door at the back of the picture I was explaining is that it's a little bit too small for a large six-wheel to go through and whatnot. So we often have to back in and out of that front door in the top left corner. As you can see, some of our concerns are pretty obvious. In the lower left-hand corner, a lot of our flammable materials and whatnot are stored in a very poorly ventilated, in fact, no ventilated room. No fire protection in the building whatsoever. And in the bottom right is our parts room, which is upstairs. So carrying parts up and down stairs can be problematic, especially if they're fairly heavy. And you have a crude waste oil furnace there in the lower left part of that staircase there as well that heats that building. So you see the inadequate sand shed supply in the top left, and then kind of an older lean-to, if you will, where we put various pieces of equipment to at least try to keep some of the weather off of it. As you can see, some of the parking lot concerns on the lower left where employees park, it's just mud, it's not paved, and a lot of failing pavement that leads to it. And in the center of the property is a kind of a makeshift, old school, dig a hole, let the water go there. If it gets too full, it just sheets off the parking lot. So there's really it's a crude attempt at stormwater management, but it certainly doesn't meet any of today's specifications or standards. And then we have a variety of storage facilities all over the property that the town has just acquired throughout the years. I think last count we had 11 different types of trailers, connexes, old sheds that other departments were getting rid of, whether it be the fire department, library, police department. We said, well, we'll take the shed and we'll store materials in it. And then our above ground tank, diesel tank as well. that services just our fleet down there. And the top right corner there shows how they got creative with putting on some precast piers, if you will, that stores a lot of larger parts, spare tires and whatnot, chains and belts for the assaulters and have you, in a rather crude storage trailer. So we've come up with several ways of phasing this through, because we understand, one, we need to be operational. So if we're going to do this on our site, we can't just go with an all-in approach. Although an all-in approach, kind of lump sum bond, may yield a better pricing, we thought it was still best to think about what are the most important things that we want to try to accomplish. And the very first thing that we have, what really kind of brought this all about, is the town has over $5 million worth of equipment. And for the majority of the entire year, it is all outside. You have equipment that's, some pieces are valued over $300,000 and they're sitting outside in rain and snow and ice and sleet and in the mud. And it's just not, if you bought yourself a nice new lawnmower for $5,000 or $6,000, I don't think you just park it in your backyard and just call it a day and just expect it to run well or last, to have good longevity to it. So it's really inappropriate for the town to be kind of doing that, conducting that with the value of our equipment, and the costs are getting higher and higher year by year on this type of equipment. So we focused on the facility first, as well as the ability to maintain it. So what you see there in phase one is the large storage facility based upon the size of our fleet for its current needs, and then future potential expansion, and all that we have to store on the property. And in the front, smaller box of that building is the fleet garage bays. One of them, which has a pull-through bay, which is it works extremely well. In fact, we had to tow a truck back just last night, as a matter of fact, and so we end up dumping it in the yard somewhere, and then we have to then end up towing it or maneuvering it to try and get it into our building. So when you have that kind of a design, it becomes very beneficial to just being able to bring it right into the work area and work on it, is to have that hook up and pull it across the yard with a loader or a cruder method. We have done in phase one a lot of the site improvements. You see the creation in the top right-hand part of the property of the stormwater detention basin, if you will. There would obviously be drainage there, and a circular pattern that rotates counterclockwise, if you will, around the back of the property that simplifies our loading patterns. We designed the building to just have, instead of then having multiple overhead doors that can, be costly to operate, they can get damaged. We have one door in on the left side of the photo slide and exiting on the right side. So everything will be a diagonal style parking into the garage. Also of note, in the left-hand corner, we considered, we're carving out a little area there by the main gate, so that right now we currently deploy out these salt sand barrels all around town. We have close to a couple dozen of them. And many of you have been privy to the discussions about speeding in town, congestion, traffic, erratic drivers and whatnot, or people that aren't paying attention. And at some point, my fear is that, liability is going to rear its ugly head, that we're encouraging people to be out on the side of the road somewhere in a dark area getting a pail of sand. And so we're trying to incorporate an area that is as our property is centralized to the town, it would be a well-lit, safe area for people to come and pick up that sand. And it also saves us on the labor extensiveness of having to patrol these barrels all winter long and try and fill them up. This is easy enough to just bring a bucket over from our shed and put it there, and people can safely enter and exit the property, and then remove that kind of liability of being all around town the way that it is. Outside of that, on this first phase, this is probably the more costly phase because it's the largest part of the project, and we have a lot of site work to do. Again, there's never been a comprehensive look at the site itself. And, in fact, I'm just not going to really touch on it, but, there's a cell, We have a tower down there as well for the communications for the town, and some other propane tanks that service both buildings. There is public water on the site, so that does help us in concerns with fire safety for the building, and then in future phases when we're going to talk about the wash bay and whatnot. This particular phase, if you want, I can just let Dan speak a little bit about what the cost is for phase one.
Yeah, I mean, as Dave pointed out, this is the lion's share of the work. And part of it is it's the most square footage of new building proposed, but also the site development, which is really necessary to stabilize the site, to minimize its environmental impact and to promote safe use of the whole property. So what we're looking at there is about 24,000 square feet of vehicle storage, that's the big rectangle, and about 7,500 square feet of vehicle maintenance. And the maintenance shop has mechanics bays, as Dave pointed out, one of them is a pull-through. And then there are mechanics office, parts rooms, fluid distribution rooms and such on the other end. It's a pretty efficient little footprint, but that's relatively expensive space because of all the things that go into making it operate. The vehicle storage shed, is big, but it's quite economical because of it's a long span. It's about 100 feet wide by 240 feet long, and that gives the opportunity not only to store all the equipment indoors and be able to manage things like putting plows and sanders onto trucks inside instead of out in bad weather and bad lighting, but also to have plenty of space on the floor in the corners between the vehicles for storage of all the smaller stuff that's currently now distributed, as Dave showed you, all over the site in containers and some fairly dramatic types of repurposed semi-trailer bodies back there. That can also support upper-level mezzanine space, which is probably the least expensive space that you can build, and is a great value for storage and other uses. So I think we're looking there. This phase would be about, let me try to do the math, it's about 65%, I think, of the total project, something like that, if you break it out. And we've broken it out into, as we'll see going forward, into 3 or even 4 phases that can really be implemented not independently, but in sequence, as opposed to doing them all at once, which would be expensive and more disruptive to the continued use of the site. This can be done, with some careful planning of construction without any real disruption to current operations, which is really a key cost-saving and operational advantage.
Yeah, and just again, so for the site, the reason why the site work is so extensive in this regard to it's to also allow for the future phases that we're going to talk about, and some of which it may be phases that the town doesn't even entertain. But we really wanted to look at this from a total, try and take care of some other issues that the town is either experiencing now or could be experiencing even further into the future. So that's the completion of phase 1. There's a good look at what a rendering would be. You see that sand salt mix bin in the right-hand corner. Also, we would plan to have this facility on complete backup power. We do not have that right now. We do for our facility where the employees are, but our garage and workshop, which is probably the one that you want to have the most, there's doors that, one of the overhead doors doesn't work. The manual one does at the back, but and some of the air guns and some of the larger compressors that we need doesn't actually have backup power. So that's kind of the look at it with the removal of some of that old lean-to that I showed you at the beginning. We leave the smaller sand shed and then the 2 salt sheds to the left side of the photo with the detention pond in the back. So phase 2 moves on to focusing on some of the workshop spaces that we need for in-house repairs of signs and whatnot, mailboxes, and also the things that we do for facilities, and also more material storage for stuff that we use for crack sealing and what have you, utilizing and repurposing the existing 1970 building. It also adds on a wash bay right next to it in the yellow rectangular square as well. That would be a professionalized wash facility that makes it safe for employees to, wash both the undercarriage and overhead with a catwalk style design, so that when we're washing the vehicles, they're doing it in a way that is much more, well, two things: quicker and safer, and a better end result, because it's much less task involved for the employee to accomplish that. And then we expand upon the existing employee facility, connect that through to the large storage facility for the equipment, for ease of access in and out of it, and we are able to expand the break room, create a more of a centralized kind of muster room, if you will, so multi-purpose training room / break room, if you will, and add on the square footage that was identified as a need for administrative areas as well. It also creates more of a central focalized point as you come up the entryway as well. Again, I'm trying to, in the interest of time, trying to speed it along, so I apologize. But I want to do it, its justice, because this was a lot of work that we've done over the past year, so I apologize for time constraints. But again, we just kind of lay those in. We see that as a definitive, phase 1 and phase 2 is something that we feel strongly about is needed for the future growth of the department. And just again, to enhance with the work we do in phase 1 with the circulation of the property as well.
Sure. Just a quick point. At this point, at phase 2, we've really provided the stuff that's needed to really optimize the longevity and safety of the fleet, because we've got the indoor storage, so vehicles are not out in the cold. They're not covered with snow or ice on a morning when the plow trucks have to get out, and they're washed. The salt buildup on the trucks is controlled. Keeping them indoors, keeping the equipment indoors and relatively warm. It's not highly heated, but you'd keep the big storage garage at 50, 55 or 60 degrees. Trucks are ready to go in the morning. They're dry, they're clean, they're safe, and they've been washed. So the effect is twofold. One is that your responsiveness and sort of safety for the operations of the department are greatly enhanced, and the longevity of the fleet is also extended by years. So we've done some studies where the number of years you get by washing and storing your vehicles indoors is a great payback on the investment in the physical space.
And a lot of that data and information, everything will be forthcoming in an executive summary, and that'll be on our website in short order. So again, in the interest of time, we're not trying to dive too deep into the weeds, but yeah, you'll see all of that. So the next phase is phase 3, where that's the render. I'm sorry, that's the rendering of phase 2. That kind of shows you how we connect to the building, and then the additional administrative area with the renovation of the 1970 building at the back of the property. That larger square in the middle area is just basically a reserved area where, in working with the fire department and the constraints of their site, and again, having an above ground, whenever you have fuel above ground, you experience a lot more trouble than if you do in ground. There's a reason why when you pull in the gas stations, you see tanks in the ground, because they're easier to, petroleum and whatnot and products like that, they don't like cold and they don't like excessive heat. They swell up in the summertime. We've had a lot of problems with bleed outs over here and everything, and the pump seize up and whatnot, and then you got to try and condition the fuel, because of the extreme frigid temperatures. So we thought a more centralized location that would free up real estate behind the fire station for them, and we'd even consider moving the crude waste oil site that volunteers run over there to our location, so we don't have to go over there and pump it out into 55-gallon drums and transport it across town. I don't want to get into exactly how we do that, but we do it, and we use that oil to heat the 1970 garage. So we thought that would be, a benefit for the fire department, and also have a more modernized tracking mechanism for the fuel system itself.
How many of those changes, like possible storing of the fuel in an underground tank, is that included in phase 2, or?
It's in the next phase.
It's in
Yeah.
phase 3?
We just wanted to identify that, again, you'll see right from phase 1, right through all of these phases, that's why phase 1 is so important, is because it's to kind of set the stage, if you will. And that's how much we've identified where we want things to go and how to position them, and how do we allow access for, the public, even after hours, if they want to come get a pail of sand, but yet the site's secure and safe and well-lit. So it all kind of just, plays through. So phase 3 does just that. It secures kind of that front area, has the fuel island, if you will, and creates that kind of centralized circulation in the front that, the sand can be available. Police, fire, public works, school district, they can come down there at any hours, fuel up. Again, have a more modernized tracking mechanism to that, so that we know, exact pieces of equipment. You can put in mileage and stuff like that, so it kicks back to the mechanic's office, so you know when a piece of equipment is up for maintenance and whatnot. And then the more important thing in this phase here is, the removal of the oldest sand shed, and then the oldest salt shed that was expanded on once previously as well. And then building a salt storage shed that holds at a minimum 3,000 tons, which would definitively benefit the community to have on the vast majority of salt that we have on need for a season on hand. And what that does is it simplifies us, because we can repurpose the other salt shed and use that for our salt sand mix shed. And then that way we're not mixing every storm, having to mix up a new batch. Like right now, every storm.
You mix every single storm.
Every storm, sometimes in the middle of the storm, because we run out. And so we'd much rather make the salt sand mix in the warmer months when the sand is drier, as well as the salt,
Around.
and have it all stockpiled undercover in a facility, so we're not basically mixing mud and putting it in our truck and then trying to spread it, which is harder on the equipment. And I could go on and on, but I won't. I'll digress. Just having nightmares as I'm thinking about it. So that's what this phase is right here. It's kind of basically finalizing some specific needs for the town. Again, reduce liability for the salt sand mix, for residents being out on the streets, pulling everything together on fueling in town rather than having cells kind of here and there, monitored or not monitored, getting them underground so we have less complications. It's a problem when you're in a sub-zero type storm and our fuel cell seizes up because it's above ground and our fleet can't get fuel. And so then we have to maybe go over to the fire or whatnot. It's problematic. That's phase 3. And again, the following phases, obviously, like what Dan said at the beginning, phase 1 is the lion's share of the project. And then the other phases, again, there are prices built in here for the fueling. But if town council or leadership of the town decides that's not something they're interested in, then the cost of the total overall project goes down. But at least we laid that out so that 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, I don't know, 20 years from now, it's a viable option. It's there. It's ready to go. Also on that new sand shed, you'll see there are various material bins on the side of it. So for our gravel, crushed stone, cold patch and whatnot, I didn't pull up the slide of how we store cold patch, but it's it's unique. This is a little bit safer, cleaner, keeps all our materials dry, keeps the weather off of them. It's important that if we have to go out quickly and get a load of gravel, because we got to wash out on the side of a shoulder somewhere, that the gravel that we're going out there with is just wet and soaked and muddy as the material that just got eroded down the shoulder. We need clean, dry products so that we can get the compaction we need and get the road shoulder stabilized and whatnot. All our materials you saw at the beginning of those slides in the existing conditions, nothing is undercover, nothing's protected, including the equipment, obviously. And so we didn't want to, there's the rendition of that. So there's your above ground, and obviously fire protection over the island. It's most common in all DPW facilities now, and state sheds. They have that. You can see the one over there at exit 4. They just put that in about 10 years ago or so. There's your new salt shed in the left corner. The existing salt shed repurposed. Again, we can store trailers underneath those. It's not for waste. We can still use those canopies to store trailers under and what have you. and then the remainder of the project that I explained out earlier. Now, and there's my American flag. I want to point out the American flag because it's a little something with me that it bothers me that we're a public facility and we don't have an American flag. So I made sure that we're going to be getting an American flag if this should come to pass. But nonetheless, so that's the final phase. Now, the next phase, we were calling it Phase 3A rather than Phase 4 because, again, you see that green space there in the middle of the, outside of the administration area. At the beginning of this project, and almost since I arrived here, Town Hall has been kind of at times struggling with, square footage here and available office space and what have you. So when we started the interviews at the beginning of all this and talking to all of staff, whether it's here or at High Range Road, we thought it would be prudent to at least carve out an area that if the future deemed that it would be smarter to have all of, DPW and engineering all under one roof, that there would be an area to expand that building to incorporate that in for engineering. There's a lot to unpack with that. What does that mean? How would it work? We don't know, but we thought that would be a smart thing to do. There's also been discussions about the potential merger of maybe recreation down the road as well. So if they were to merge with us and they were to come onto that site or whatnot and they bring their equipment down, then at least we have an area reserved for it. And that's why Phase 3, I don't want to dive into it too much because there's a lot of what-ifs there, and that's that last kind of connection on that building as you see that there and the approach up the drive. We just thought, again, we wanted to make sure that since we were going through this exercise, that we really thought as far into the future as we could, understanding today's concerns and needs and expectations of what needs to be met and addressed, and then try to anticipate anything that the town may face down the road in the future. So it is a master plan. Phases can be done at any time. And we wanted to make sure that any first phase didn't interfere with future phases or future development or ideas. Again, with the crystal ball we have in front of us today. And I think that is the final look there. Again, I brought Dan along in case if you wanted to have any questions about costs and expectations. Again, that document will be coming out. I know this is CIP. This is for future planning. Obviously, we're not looking to put this on the ballot in March. This is a planning document. This is our first time, bringing it out and rolling it out. I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion and, talking, into the future and consideration and what have you. But I will say this, the first phase is, if we do nothing, the first phase is probably the most important and dire. I mean, anybody that wants to come down and look around, you really don't have to have any level of education and degree of common sense to understand that what we're dealing with down there. Again, I use the illustration, if you bought yourself a lawnmower or a really nice car, I mean, these trucks now are coming in at $225,000 a piece, almost $250,000, and climbing rapidly. 3 years ago, they were $190,000, and we're up to almost $250,000. They're not gonna get any cheaper. We're lucky if we wash the entire fleet once a season. Once a season. We try to keep up with it, but again, working in a 1971 stall garage when we're trying to do a repair like we just had going on today, they were trying to repair that truck we hauled back last night for the radiator. So he's on one end of the building trying to do that work, and we have a crew 5 feet separation between their truck and his truck, blasting salt, trying to wash the truck off. And it's just not, it's difficult working conditions, to say the least. So, and it goes to protecting the town's investment. Until somebody else can figure out how we don't have to plow roads. Don't see that anytime soon.
And nothing breaks.
Yeah, and nothing breaks.
Dave, does this new plan give you a place for the backhoe and any future excavators or something you might purchase for the town?
Everything is incorporated underneath that roof,
Okay, perfect.
all of it. Now, where do we go from here? Again, I just want to roll it out to the CIP so that you know that this is now completed, and now there's lots of discussion points from here. Where I see this going at this point, in talks with, the town manager and then the town council, obviously, would probably be the formation of a building committee. And then they can review everything that we've rolled out here tonight, right down into the weeds, look at the document, the costs, you know, are there things that we can do to scale this back a little bit? Should we scale it back? Where should we scale it back? Are there parts of the document, like that last phase 3A of administration, is it worth to just wipe that right out because it scares people or it's just too much to think about? But for the, you know, the sake of the exercise, I thought it was important to do that. You can never think too far ahead as far as I'm concerned. So, and, you know, we'll see where the building committee comes, and then there'll be several meetings after that and bringing it back to town council and future CIP committees.
Dave, any, with phase one and possibly the truck wash being years out, can you incorporate part of this garage to be able to wash your trucks and then phase that out once you go to the wash bay with a gas trap and grease trap and
That's an excellent
Mm-hmm.
question. So with phase one, that was kind of the intent was, and again, it's also the intent of why we wanted to kind of go slow, because we're still working down there.
Sure.
We still need to be operational. So, so in phase one, what it does is it allows us to use the old garage to wash as we are right now. But perhaps we can do two pieces of equipment because we don't have the mechanic working in there anymore. You know, we could do two at a time. We certainly could do them a little bit quicker because we don't have to worry about salt blasting into an area that we're trying to work on safety-sensitive equipment. And then down the road, when we get into phase two, and we want to retrofit that building, then it's not going to, you know, be an impact to us. That would happen, you know, during the summertime. And then that brings us back to that pull-through bay that could also double as just a temporary wash area while they're doing the new wash bay and fitting up the old garage. So that would go hand in hand with, you know, we're out of the way while they're doing construction, and then the next year when they're retrofitting that, we're using the new construction
Yep.
to continue on.
Good.
So that's another reason why we think phasing is important as well. And likewise with then the future steps and, you know, for the materials, because materials are important, you know? I mean, you know, the quicker and safer you can load them and the better quality that you keep them, then it's less wear and tear on the trucks, it's less wear and tear on the crew, and it does a better job. I mean, when you're putting, you know, sand mix out with a, you know, a condensation, you know, up at 40%, you know, you're supposed to be down in the single digits or 10% moisture rate on your product, not 30, 40. Mud, yeah. And you don't, it provides a better level of public safety because it's not coming off the spreader, right? You know, so then you gotta, sometimes the guys have to adjust the gates and the rates because of the type of product that they have on the truck at the time. And that's tricky because it's not an exact science. It's not like, oh, you just click it and you watch it go up. It's not like when you're doing a salt shaker on your food. It's a little bit of a science, and you can't do it as easily on the fly in the dark out on the road. You can't just pull over and.
I know how key it is to clean this equipment after every storm, because you've got to get in and inspect and make sure you've got everything operating.
Correct.
And if it sits there for a week and you haven't had a chance for freezing temperatures and able to service it in between, grease it, you know, nobody's gonna do it outside. And you can't in that type of environment. And the longevity of the equipment, I know you've hit on that. You know, you're gonna get multiple more years out of each vehicle being able to maintain it and keep it
Yeah.
clean.
Correct,
So-
and you know, the other problems, you know, storing the equipment outside, and the majority of the larger trucks are at least under the canopies, but they're plugged in, and so, you know, when we have frigid temperatures, if we lose power, and then the glow plugs are off, or a GFI pops, which happens a lot, and then you come in, or the trucks have been there through the weekend, and then your fleet doesn't start. Now you're chasing your tail to try and get the trucks going and get them out there, and anybody that's tried to start a cold diesel engine,
In a
if
snowstorm.
you got a magic trick that you can do,
Just go
let
back
us
in-
know,
go back
because,
inside.
yeah, and these trucks that we have today, they're not like the good old days where you can just, you know, dump a little something down the carburetor and
It's all electronic.
fire her up. You ain't doing that. So, it just plays to the point of the importance of having, indoor, I mean, pretty much virtually almost every DPW around us, has indoor facilities, has at least the vast majority of their fleet inside. The real true frontline equipment is inside. So,
Dave, in addition to, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for coming this early in front of this committee. This might be a foolish question, so I apologize in advance. But when you mentioned the salt and the mixing, when it's in dire straits, and you're mixing in cold, you're essentially getting to mud. Putting that on the roads, does that degrade the roads at all?
it doesn't hurt the roads, but it diminishes our ability to provide the best level of road safety that we can, because we're using an inferior product when we do it. In fact, if you go on our town website, the presentation that I did about a year and a half ago, leading up to, asking for the funding to do this, in that presentation, there's a small little 15-second clip, that I did a video of, so that you can see it for yourself on what we're talking about when we're mixing right in the middle of a storm, and it's kind of a rain slushy, ice mix that we're trying to get back out there, but we're out of salt sand mix, so we're grabbing the sand that's soaking wet in the pile behind the building, bringing it out, dumping it on the ground, grabbing salt out of the building, trying to mix it on the pavement real quick, stuff it back in the building. But when they're loading it on the trucks, it won't go through the screens, so they got to kind of like bring the bodies up to try to get the angle right, and then slam the body back down to get the sand to drop down through the screens, and it's just not, it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
Say the least.
That makes sense. So kind of pivoting a little bit to kind of costs, obviously your early stages, and again, thank you for coming this early. On the sheet, you mentioned a range of 25 to 45 million.
Correct.
Has that, have you kind of looked at what this cost might be? Has there been any
Yes.
updates to that?
Yep, so in the executive summary when it comes out, generally speaking, the first phase that you're looking at there, and again, I don't want people to get hung up on numbers, because we have them all breaking out, all into every part of the large sums that I'm gonna bulk out for you right now. But the first phase is approximately $30 million. Now, we can go through committees, and Dan has been excellent at this, explaining this to me. I'm like, well, what if we cut out, a mechanic bay or this or that? And the best way that Dan said it to me was, well, you can cut out, 10% of your square footage, but you're not gonna see 10% realization on your dollars. So you gotta really think about what's your best bang for your buck at that point. Now, again, we don't wanna build something that is overly excessive, and we got enough storage out for 50 years from now. But again, we've even had some foresight on that too, so that the buildings, the way that they're positioned on the property and whatnot, could be expanded longer. So even if we decided to shrink them up a little bit, they could then be laid out, and the circulation of the site wouldn't change or have to deviate too much from that. So we're really trying to look out for Londonderry down the road as well. But yeah, phase one is approximately 30, and then the next phase, I believe, was 10, and then it scaled down, and then like the last phase 3A was,
1.8, I think,
yeah,
something like that.
something like that.
And those were costs that we extended them out over periods of fiscal years. So you'll see a chart in the final report that kind of gives you a year-by-year expenditure, with a couple of different scenarios about whether you design everything all at once and then build them in sequence, or you design each piece at a time. So there's a premium to phasing the work, just really mostly because of the passage of time. So your best value is to build it right now, but, realities of funding and all often make that not possible, so.
And then the escalation, when you do it that way, it's like this. So I know the numbers seem large, but depending on which year you program this in, you could see a much better actual closer number. And whereas, numbers that we're trying to project today,
Yeah, you gotta start somewhere, right? I mean, it's
It's a place to have a conversation.
right.
yeah.
And I think,
That's why it's such a wide range of 25 to 45, because, again, when we started this over a year ago, we didn't know exactly where this may plug in. and all of the phases included, you know, kind of depending on scaling back or completely eliminating them.
You also mentioned grant sources.
Yep.
So, I mean, so I'm just, obviously, yes.
Sure, so
Yes,
I'll
absolutely.
let Dan speak to that, because as you see that, there's an awful lot of rooftop there.
Yep.
And, you know, luckily, we're in an area where we've got some good, you know, distance from surrounding subdivisions and whatnot. You know, we're really kind of tucked back in there, and so, you know, if we did solar panels there and whatnot to help with the energy efficiency of our facility, or perhaps even out to the grid, you know, there are programs that Dan has identified that could help with that. Even I believe there's some available, I might misspeak, but for the fueling island, I think there's things too
Yeah,
that.
there are some, there are state level grants, there's some potential federal ones, and there are utility rebates as well. And you know, you'll also have a generator, and you may have the ability to do some load sharing with the utility and get a better rate. That usually affects your not your capital costs, but your operating costs over time. The opportunity for rooftop solar is great, both on the salt sheds and on the main building. And that's a good place to start a conversation, because in some cases, you might bring in a third-party vendor to actually supply that whole system, and in return, give you essentially a guaranteed utility rate over a period of time. But things do change. You know, not the tax picture, but there are now ways that municipalities can get effectively the tax refund that they're not really eligible for, because you don't pay taxes. But you may be able to get a direct rebate, you know, if you are able to provide power back to the grid. So lots of ways to look there for ways to support the project. In terms of primary capital costs, I think that will take a little more analysis as we look at what programs might be available now and in the future. Again, that's part of that complicated equation of when do you build what part of this, and what does the cost picture look like 5 years from now as opposed to next year.
If anyone else has anything else, you mentioned kind of what I call a plan for the plan, right? So part of your plan is to establish a building committee, get these documents all consolidated. From a suggestion standpoint, and I know that you do this whenever there's a snowstorm. My favorite site is the DPW site. I get accurate, up-to-date information, which is important. But having, obviously, all these documents centralized, which you're doing, continuing to do on our kind of website. And I've seen building committees really do well. And, and we do get a lot of good kind of good experience folks coming forward to provide kind of that aspects. So obviously you want to, I would definitely suggest, setting one of those up there. To get to this, to be on a ballot, what's the timeline look like?
That's a very good question, and one that I've struggled.
And what are the milestones?
One that
we
I've
need
struggled
to
with a
meet?
lot, and Dan probably at times was like, I need an answer, because the numbers that you're asking me for, are they for this year? Are they for next year? Are they, and now I'm tussling with and, talking with the town manager and knowing like what the school district is going through and what they're trying to do too, where's the right time to plug that in. So, I think that's something for the leaders of the community to decide when we plug it in. I think that it's very easy to demonstrate that this is a definitive and responsible need of the community. I mean, this would be the first, I wanted to be clear, this would be the first facility for a DPW. Single bay garage built in 1970 is not considered a facility, no stretch of the imagination. But where I think I go from here is, again, winter being a busy time of the year, but nonetheless, time is of the essence. I would try to work with the town manager and talk about getting one going, so that at the very least in the early spring, maybe perhaps March, we have a committee already formed and we start having meetings. I'd like to take them for some field trips. I have some sites in mind that I'd like to get them to go see. I've been doing them myself, even in neighboring communities, Derry, Windham. I know what Salem's got. But there's been some impressive new facilities been built. Not necessarily that we would go that grand, but, you know, Manchester's was new many years ago. Nashua just built a very new facility. North Andover has a good one, and Rochester has probably one that's more comparable to this size that we're looking at, that Weston and Sampson spearheaded.
Bit bigger, but
Bit bigger,
comparable,
but they're on a very compact lot, so I think when you're on a tighter lot, you can learn a lot from that. I've done a lot of research myself and stuff, but again, it's not about me, it's about what a community thinks and what a committee can all come together on and then support, and then hopefully the leadership of the town brings forward. I think personally, for me, the timing for us is probably, probably secondary, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. I think it's secondary in nature to what the school district's needs are at the moment, only because I think they're a little bit further along in their preparation of some of the things that they have coming up. And I think if they can get over one of their larger hurdles, then I think perhaps it would be nice to pivot to the town. And selfishly, I think this is probably the largest, most beneficial capital improvements project that the town has in its current need, in my professional opinion.
No, thank you, and I think that's a good definitely thank you for the transparency there. The other, and you hit the nail on the head there. The planning, right? It's getting the numbers, getting ensuring that not just the capital quotes, all of these towns and cities that have put in new DPWs. What's the value that they're seeing? I think it's important for the town to kind of recognize kind of the the value adds. How it where you present it, and it's a really good argument, makes perfect sense. But the numbers really show where kind of the savings of mixing sand and protecting our fleet, especially if we're if the investments of the fleet that we've made in the last few years and will need to continue to make, what does that look like? So it's definitely it's the hard cost. It's also kind of the soft savings that
I mean, ideally,
to kind of trust and verify.
What I want to see happen, what I know will happen, and Dan has all the charts that can show it, but charts are charts and they're boring. But our fleet right now, the six-wheelers, I'm going to focus on them because they're your workforce when it comes to snow events. We have 13 of those trucks. Again, the cost is just. I can remember getting trucks for $65,000, and I can't believe we're knocking on the door of $250,000, and they're far more superior. I've seen remember back in the day when we had automatics, we got away from automatics, went back to standards, and now we're back to automatics. But the automatics are far superior from what they were years ago, and they're a little bit easier to maintain, and you don't have to worry about people driving a clutch, which there are not many these days that know how to do that. So, but that being said, our fleet really, when we have it on a 10-year replacement cycle, and when you're at $250,000 per truck and you got 13 of them, it seems like every year you're asking for a truck. And we've done a lot of good in the last several years to catch up on our replacement program. So we're about to get a breathing year. But that being said, if we had a facility like this and we're able to maintain it better and keep them inside and treat the equipment better, I'd like to see stretch that fleet out to a 15-year lifespan. And I think we can get there. And some of the charts that Dan has will show that. We already stretch, and when I say a 10-year, we don't follow it. All communities are challenged with sticking regimented because times change and budget dollars dry up. So most trucks go out the door. Yeah, we may get them approved at 10 years, but again, it's an 18-month turnaround before we even get the truck. So usually by the time they leave our property, they're 11, 12 years old, but they are in dire straits. I mean, we're really limping to the finish line with them. Otherwise I should be looking for trucks at year 8, and you're going to be like, Truck's only 8 years old. It's got, 20,000 miles on it. It's only got, 1,000. What are you talking about? But I think at least if we can, if they're stored properly, we're washing them more frequently because we can do it and safer and easier and quicker. And we're putting product on it that's not straining the trucks as much. Then we can stretch that, and there's a cost savings there. It's an easy to, you don't have to really have a chart to understand that if you can keep the truck for 15 years versus 10, with the prices going where they are, and the turnaround on getting them from the factories, it's a no-brainer. So that'll take some time to obviously see that facility, pay its dividends back, but you'll almost see it immediately in the replacement factor, for sure.
Any other questions?
I have one. It seems like the salt sand mix is a pretty significant issue.
Yes.
Is there a way to address that in any way in phase one? Not necessarily the full fix that you're going for in phase three, but is there a way to give you a temporary structure for a salt sand mix? And I know temporary structures, nobody wants to do that, I get that, but if you're talking about years and years potentially between these phases, maybe you should try and find a temporary solution to the salt sand storage in phase one.
I hear you loud and clear. There are facilities like that you can build, the domes and whatnot. Sometimes you see them temporarily set up out on the high sides of highways and whatnot. I can tell you, though, they're big money. If it was like $50,000 and we can get it over the sand pile and keep it dry, yeah, great, I'm in. It's relatively short money for a temporary solution. But if you've got to spend $500,000 for a temporary solution that will then be deemed as a permanent solution, no. To me, it's throwing money away. I worked for a community that temporary things became permanent. Like temporary, 15 years is not temporary. That's
Right.
That's permanent. And then those types of facilities really are meant to be temporary. If you're going to use them as a long-term, full, use facility, they rarely pan out. You see them collapse, and then you're repairing something that was meant to be temporary, and it's a costly repair when they collapse, or the loader hits the little 1.5-inch pipe that's holding it, and a
Slippery slope.
12-inch, 16-inch thick concrete wall is, I'm sure Mr. Slater can attest to, is a lot stronger and can take a little bit of a bump or a rub from a loader bucket than a tarp that's supported by some steel membrane,
But even that can only take so much.
True.
With a
Sealing
loader.
it is
With a
important.
loader.
But, yeah, so, I mean, I understand it. If we were getting into the business of it, then I would say, sure. But Londonderry's already been in this business since the dawn of time, and we're not getting out of it anytime soon. So, in my opinion, we continue on the terrible road we're on, and until we can do it right. Because I've had those scenarios said to me, and it's like, I'm not looking to, I don't think it would be pertinent for the town to buy something used when we know we need something that's practical and new to do the job.
So it's worth the wait to put it in phase three and make sure that's done in a good way.
In my opinion, I mean, we did tussle with that, but again, we looked at preservation of the equipment, and I hate to say this, but the second phase is really to address, some of the employee safety and then their working environment. But phase one has a good lion's share of that too. And just doing the site work alone makes me feel better because we'll be able to.
Asphalt to mix on.
I mean, our employees, they work long and hard, and then they come out and they're not walking across the parking lot that's treated like this building or the schools or whatever. And I worry about that because it just takes a second for them to slip, fall, hit their head, they're in the dark or whatever, and it shouldn't be that way. It just shouldn't, because in my opinion, they're the most valuable employees we got this time of year. And when I go down one person, it's a struggle when we have such a small department, so.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'm good.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you, and thank you for shifting up the order. I asked that
Appreciate that.
on behalf of Dan, so you would have to be here as long, so.
I learned something.
Thank you so much.
You owe
Thank
you owe Anthony some
Yeah.
some brownies or something.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good. I'm Amity Small. I'm the new business administrator. So I'm coming in to talk about this project when I haven't been on the ground floor of everything else. So if you have any questions, I know Kevin and Bob have been there through it. I would refer everybody, we did several years ago a facilities study that came up with a 10-year plan of what we needed to look at. Where we were. We did the district-wide infrastructure. We got that bond passed. We've had great work improving the efficiency of some of our HVAC systems. And from there, we wanted to move on to a priority of Moose Hill and full-day kindergarten. And we had a building committee for that. We had a real push last year to get that on the ballot. We had a over $30 million bond ask on the ballot that came close to passing, but it was shy of the 60%. So we went back and thought about where we were and how we still feel very much so that full day K is a priority for our community, for our youngest learners. In the midst of this, our enrollment trends have been different than we thought they would be, so some space has been opened up at the elementary schools. So what used to be 4 projects prior to this year is now condensed into 3 that we bring to CIP to look through. So the first project that we are talking about is getting in full day K. So the numbers that we have now are less than a third of what we brought to the voters last year. And it doesn't only look at the full day K problem, it looks at another issue that we had in our facility study, which I'll get to in phase 2 of the district office and the current lease that we have. But what has come up with our latest project for Moose Hill is to use some of the space that has been opened at the elementary schools to integrate full-day kindergarten into each of the neighborhood elementary schools, South, North, and Matthew Thornton. South and North, their numbers have gone low enough that we could have a set of 2 modulars at each of those schools. And then Matthew Thornton hasn't had quite the lowering enrollment, so we would be looking at 2 modular classrooms to integrate that, and then shift the Moose Hill staff to the neighborhood schools to offer a full day K program there, making the elementary schools K to 5. To do that, the cost right now, so we are in the midst of this. Just 2 days ago, we got the final cost from our engineer and architecture for construction costs and all of that. And they quoted us $7,435,000 to get the modulars. There's a lot of site work, there's drainage issues, there's a lot of work that goes into it, and we also want to make sure that the modulars that we put in are going to match the capacity of classrooms that we have in the buildings themselves, so that they are a real part. This would be a bonded project, so whatever we bond has to last the life of the bond. So we'd be looking for a 15-year bond at this point is what we're looking toward. So we want to make sure that we do it right, that all the site work is completed correctly, that the engineers have everything in place for these modulars to be as Dave said, if they're going to be there for 15 years, it's more than a temporary solution. They would be part of the buildings. And then we would be looking to bring this to voters on this year's ballot in March. And it would be a phased-in project so that it would start for 26, 27 to integrate the elementary schools to be K through 5. So that's that project in a nutshell. Do you have any questions about that, or Bob or Kevin, anything to add?
What is the lifespan on the modulars? I know you said one of the last 15 years. What's the expected lifespan?
So when we talk to both the bond company and the modulars, they can last up to 40 years. Yeah, if they're taken care of and everything is prepped right and the foundation work is done well.
And I'll just jump in a little bit to hit off what Amity did, because I've been involved with this project from the inception and facility studies since 2021, and on the kindergarten committee since 2019. on space needs and kindergarten. How this started is we heard the voters in March as a school board. Like Amity said, we were 54% on the addition for full-day K and space needs. We were 54% on space needs, about 50% on full-day K. And we heard loud and clear. So what district office did with staff, got to work on it in mid-April with the school board, and we started back in May with about 5 projects, 5 different looks on how to get the space needs we need for our programs, and is it possible to make this work with a full-day program? And we still had lingering up here district office with 3 years left on the lease. As some of you know, or most of you know, we were here several years ago, tried to get an addition onto Town Hall at the sounds of about $4.8 million for district office, and that lost by about 6%. So we continue to lease at a rate of about $200,000 a year up at Kitty Hawk, and have approximately 3 years left. So we went right back to work. We appreciate the voters coming out and speaking the way they did. And we knew we still had these issues. So how could we incorporate this and try to ask for as little as possible tax dollars? So again, we started with 5 projects. The board, working with the superintendent and Amity and her staff, got down to 2 projects, and then we finalized it back in late July to this one project, which was, as the superintendent brought to us in April, that enrollment forecast was down approximately 2 classrooms in each elementary building. So we took some time as we looked into the 5 projects, and the school board had some conversations during these meetings, and some ways to look at it, doing something different. And we looked at a small build at the same location, but in a smaller volume. We looked at putting modular units at Moose Hill as another option, rather than brick, mortar, and steel. As we know, construction costs, like everything, are higher, and that. So we looked at those options, and just found the cost was still in the $20 to $22 million, and guess that did not even take care of district office. We looked at buying a commercial property over at Buttrick and moving LEAP program over there and making full-day K at Moose Hill. That would still need a small addition, because as you know, there's no cafeteria, there's no gym, a multi-purpose room to have gym and that. So we vetted that. That came in at about $23 million. That actually had a higher cost for staff, because we were going to have 2 separate locations. So you're going to almost hire an additional staff for the pre-K and leave the staff that's at Moose Hill for kindergarten. So that number was high. So then we came back early June or mid-June and came up with the idea that the superintendent had asked us, had informed us of space in the elementaries. So we came up with the idea, how about a couple of modulars, because we have about 12 kindergarten classes. So being able to get 4 classes in each elementary by adding 2 portables, as Amity stated, Matthew Thornton did not decrease in enrollment as much as North and South, so it'll be either 3 or 4 portables there. Could we make this work? And then the wing of kindergarten is basically looking at Moose Hill, is to the right side. The center corridor would be the LEAP programs with the 2 portables that are there. And that could service pre-K 3 and 4. So taking the space to the right, we could use as office space and get us out of 6 Kitty Hawk at a tune of $200,000+ a year. 3 years comes fast. Even in this, if we get to go forward with this, we're still 2 years from getting in there. So that leaves us 1 year on the lease, if this is to get on the ballot and approved in March, because you've got to do it in phases. As Amity stated, if this gets approved, modulars get installed, start next summer, get completed by the following September of '26. Kindergarten starts, students move out in the summer of '26, opens up Moose Hill, now you start your retrofit of office space, sealing off the building for once school is out and closing that building in, so pre-K is separate from district office with your firewall, your entries, your security, and all that. So there's a timeline of 7 to 8 months once kindergarten starts. So that gets us out just over a year ahead of schedule on the lease, with a small payment towards the fit-up that would still be owed of about $40,000. So all in all, it seemed to be the most fiscally responsible thing to do to take care of our program's needs of so many classrooms needed for special education programs. Opens up the opportunity with staff in all the elementary buildings for our programs that are already in the building to service our students in kindergarten. And then it gives us space to use for office space in a school building on campus. So now the superintendent and the business administrator and assistant superintendent can service 4 buildings in a matter of minutes by a golf cart or even walking to 4 out of our 6 buildings. Centrally located is much better in case of emergency situations, much better for staff to go to staff meetings. So there's a lot of savings in time that they're in their buildings and not on the road traveling. So with the number that we have here tonight, we felt as though at approximately $9 million compared to $34 million last year for pre-K and kindergarten, not including district office, which is in the tune of $6 million. So you're talking at a $40 million project we have discussed over the last 3 years, now at $9 million. It's not the ideal situation of converting and moving staff and that they're accustomed to. Moose Hill's a wonderful building. We have a wonderful staff. But we know how important it is to create the space, give our staff a good environment to teach these kindergarten and pre-K kids in our special education classrooms, and to think of our taxpayers that we heard you. We've tried for district office, we've tried for the addition, and we found a way with the modular buildings being so well built today. And I will tell you, that's going to be the coming thing here in the future with a lot of buildings for educational purposes, for medical purposes. It's becoming too costly to build brick and mortar and steel. So a lot of school districts are going to look at modular way to go when you rebuild buildings. It can be done in a controlled environment. It can be built on time and schedule and delivered and erected in days. In weeks, be connected and be in service. So you're talking months out in the field compared to 6 to 9 months being in the field due to weather constraints and environment. So that's why you can buy these units at a reasonable cost, because they can mass produce them and they just make them very durable. So it's a big change for the district. We're working through that. It's going to take us a year to work through it. So we figured, let's try to get this information out over, the next several months and show the community, all the good things that will come out of it, and what we've done cost-wise and energy-wise to try to get that number down where it's palatable on top of everybody else's other concerns cost-wise, and that. So I think that's where we're at with that. So
Yeah.
if you guys have any questions on that, and then Amity can just talk a little bit on the high school, which is down the road.
Any questions on these? I do know the superintendent is going to touch upon this at our next meeting on December 17th, our budget meeting, and then there will be a bond hearing on January 14th.
Great plan.
Yeah, no, and Bob, you kind of didn't make a good, well, a lot of good points, but one point that I'd like to definitely focus on is kind of the future of these projects and modulars, right? So I think the perception of modulars is temporary, but to your point, Amity, when you're like, these can last up to 40 years, that's pretty permanent. So it's a good plan. It's significantly less, obviously it's significantly less than what was, prevented, or provided to the voters. My my biggest thing here, though, is the facilities plan that the district did. It outlined kind of those gaps. There was cost associated with it. If I recall correctly, there was a significant amount of investments that were needed, and I think a previous CIP plan did kind of identify those, but there was a significant amount of investments that needed to be done in all three of our elementary schools. So I would definitely want us to kind of definitely consider how these modules, putting these modules in, but also how does that look?
Yep.
I'm envisioning like Lego pieces all over the place right now with, which might be cool, but I just wanted to just kind of like.
Yeah, no,
see.
that's a great question, and I think our superintendent is gonna definitely have pictures to show at the bond hearing presentation he does. But for us, we met significantly with Ekman, who we've been working with, to make them look like they're part of the buildings.
Yep.
And if you look at some of the newer ones now, we wanted to look at like the brick pieces of it, so it looks like part of the school. And then part of the costs are getting the connecting hallways, so they're not anything that you would feel like you're leaving the building going to another, so that it's pretty seamless. And then the principals would work to keep all the grade levels in their appropriate spots so that they fit just like they're part of that hallway that they're in.
And I think what Jeff is getting at is the master plan that you have for the school district. It includes, if I remember correctly, the next step after this is looking at doing some work at the high school. And then beyond that, we start to address Matthew Thornton and then south and then north. Maybe I got the order wrong.
All three.
All three, but not all at the same time.
They probably would be.
Okay, fair enough.
It would be a package,
How
but that can change.
how does that plan, if we eventually start addressing the long-term needs at the elementary schools, where do this solution that we're coming up with now, where does that fit in? I mean, are these things gonna be a waste by the time we get to that anyway?
That's a good-
Or,
Well,
question.
so I think, and I'm going to kind of speak a little to this in our third with the high school. I think what we did is with the facilities plan, if we could have everything we need, and it's the best for our students and it's the best building that we could provide, what would the cost be? And I think you guys have all talked about that tonight, that's just not a reality. The cost associated with the biggest, best high school that we could get isn't ever going to get passed by voters because it would be such a burden. So I think what the facilities study has done is it allowed us to prioritize and to see what we needed to do first. We needed to get that HVAC structure and get some of those things. We have some capital projects to address maintenance of roofs and all those heating systems and other things down the road. But this allowed us to say, okay, we needed to start with that. Then we go to Moose Hill, then the district office, then the high school, and then the elementary schools. So I think it has given us that order of how we need to look at, but when we get to that point, I think it's going to involve re-looking at the plan to see where we are now, what is the reality of the costs, because the costs only go up, and what can we bring to the community and still support our learners.
And Patrick, to that point, that's a great point. We felt as though being able to utilize a couple of classrooms in the elementary along with the modulars gives us a 10-year window here to look at where enrollment really is going.
okay.
You know, enrollment continues to dip a little bit. We never know when there's going to be that bubble. This gives us the opportunity. We don't know with the building in the area how many kids. I know the number is low of kids moving into Londonderry due to cost, but it gives us a longer picture on these elementaries. Who knows, 10 years from now, we could be looking at, reducing one. But it gives us time, or 15 years.
Gives you room to breathe.
It does. It gives us time to monitor for the taxpayers, and we're not looking at just doing a full renovation of 3 schools, and 15 years from now, we don't need one. We don't know. the crystal ball, and I don't care, we've been through surveys, we've had people look at it, tell us birth rates, tell us this. They don't know. So you can pay for all the advice you want. We've got to deal with it as a community and try to get through these situations. And I feel as though the district office and the school board working together have got an excellent plan at the most cost-effective way to make this happen. And without that dip in enrollment from last year to this year, we'd be at a much higher rate. But where we have this bubble and we can utilize modulars that'll last us 30, 40 years, the investment definitely is the way to go at this point for the space needs. So,
Yeah, I totally agree. I just, I'm
so-
trying to be forward-thinking at the same
Absolutely.
time, but I realize that sometimes we're restricted by what's palatable for the voters.
Yep.
So to that point, our third project just to have on the radar is the high school. And it's a $116 million ask. It's the way it was written in the facility study. That includes a better gymnasium, an auditorium, all the things we've talked about over the course of time, really. I feel like I've been in the school district 25 years. Auditorium has always been a hot button item. But what we need to do after we get full day K and the DO resolved with whatever solution it is that comes to pass, at the very least, we need to look at phase one of the high school. It is a wood foundation that at some point that at least that area needs to be looked at. So we wanted to get this in the queue for CIP. We don't think that this would start to come to fruition for 4 or 5 years. It would be eligible for building aid, and that in itself is a process with the state to get in that queue. So we want to have it on the radar. If we were to ask for everything, it's saying $116 million right now. If we were to ask for everything in 5 years, that cost would go up. But I think at the very least, you'll see us come back to you at some point with a updated plan to address phase one of the high school to make it up to safety standards. But that we would definitely have a building committee as we move forward with that.
Any questions?
I guess it's kind of a budget question and not necessarily a CIP question, but in the next 5 years, do we have bonds that are coming off? that
Yes.
Free up the opportunity to get these projects in?
That's a CIP.
Yep.
Is it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, it is a great question. We have a district-wide bond that's coming off for the 26 budget, so you'll hear about that next week at the budget presentation. And then the year after, we have either South or North School, another one comes off. And then a few years after that, another one comes off there. So, yeah, so it would be good timing as far as that's concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We good? Fantastic. Okay. Right, so that concludes our review of project overviews and presentations. I'm assuming you're done.
Yes. Thank you. Unless there's anything else. You can-
Now I just want to kind of open the floor for public comment. All right, I will close for the floor for public comment. Let's get into CIP committee deliberations, project scoring, prioritization, and placement.
Do you want to go just right through this, the way it's laid out, full day K, SAU, high school, DPW, on our sheet here?
I do.
Can you send me that sheet?
Should be on.
It's on your computer.
Oh, it's on my computer. Yeah.
There you go.
All right, great. Does anybody have a login?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Kelly, that's the master.
Correct. So this is the master overview of the projects before the committee. And so historically, what we've done is you, as a committee, deliberate, and we will input your scoring as a committee score, and then the priority, and then the placement that you would like it to be for this CIP document.
Okay.
And just the scoring criteria is laid out before you on screen, just as a reminder.
Awesome.
All right. So the first one is,
Full day. Kelly, so we're gonna go to the tabs, right? We'd kind of go through the tabs and then we would insert it into your,
Sure, so the tabs show what the school and then DPW had.
Yep.
So we can score yours and then
all right.
do it project by project.
all right, let's start with, yeah, let's go, through the tabs. Everyone has it on their computer. Kelly has the master. Open up and read only, just so we're not overwriting Kelly's work. That's just
So this-
graciously gonna.
However you want to do it.
Graciously going to do it here. So, full day K, that addresses an emergency, public safety, or school safety need. The district put that as a 0.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree that it's a 0, Mr. Chair.
I would agree.
You might, the space needs at Moose Hill might lend that, you might give that a 1 for school safety because there is space issue in existence at Moose Hill. I mean, thoughts on that? Maybe that's too in the weeds, but, part of the plan last year was to resolve some of those space needs.
I think we talked, though, that it's basically just safety, not education
Okay,
needs.
and there's
I
no
think-
safety issues associated
I
with,
think this came up last year as well.
Yeah,
It was
You're
more, this
refreshing
is a
a memory
safety
now.
needs in the
Yeah.
building, but not education, Patrick,
okay,
and that.
And I
it's an if this said education
Right.
need, it would be a 5 in my opinion. But school safety need is the roof falling in,
okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
and I think that the next point here, so if we're all
Covers
good with
that.
0,
Yeah.
is address a deficiency in service or facility.
I'd put that as a 5, Mr. Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Provides capacity needed to serve existing population or future growth.
5.
5.
Results in long-term cost savings.
But we just changed that a little bit. Because we've made ways of being able to do it a little bit more cost-effective, but I don't know that it changes that number at all.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if the project wasn't in existence, it wouldn't
Wouldn't
be anything,
right.
but it's there. But I think 3 is still the right number for that.
That's fair.
I'm good with that.
Supports job development, increased tax base.
I think 4 is fair for that.
Yeah, it makes us more attractive as a community having the full day K, which could lead to increased tax base.
Servicing the increased tax base, yeah.
Leverages non-property tax revenues. District marked as a 3. Are we seeing that?
Say maybe a 2.
Because is there any money for the project coming from outside sources?
Right, we would,
No
it's
building aid available.
fully bonded.
Yeah.
Could we, yeah, I'm more, just for transparency, I would like to see that as probably a 2.
I'm good with it too.
Yep, 2 sounds good.
Okay.
Matching funds for a limited time, I would say that's probably a 1.
Are there any matching funds?
There are none available at this time.
So realistically, a 0.
0?
That would be a 0.
Zero.
Yeah, I think that should be a
0.
All that said, though, CIP priority assignment, do we want to do that after we score everything?
No,
Sorry.
I don't know. I think if we're on the page, we might as well do it.
So from a priority assignment standpoint, these 6 here, 1 being urgent.
See, what's a little different here is,
Yeah, no, yeah, please, if there's more context.
The non-property tax revenue.
Could you just, Amity, I'm sorry, could you just come to the mic?
that's a good point. Because you get more
Yeah,
adequacy
you get
per
more
student.
adequacy because instead of them being a half-day student, they're
Okay.
considered a
Full-day
full-time student. So we would increase the money that we get for adequacy for all the
Doubles,
kinder.
right? 'Cause
Yep,
we
it
get
would
half
double.
for a half day.
Okay.
Yep, it wouldn't, not the first year, because you have to, you get your adequacy a year out. But yes, it would increase what we get from the state for adequacy.
So on 200 kids, we get another 400,000
I put that
in
in before.
adequacy, so.
Yeah, that changes the conversation.
Yep, so that's leverages the non-property tax revenues at 4.
Four?
Yeah.
And Amity, there's still not matching funds available, right? All right.
Yeah.
Just,
Kelly, you made that a 5? Oh,
Got
got
it,
it.
I got it.
okay.
From a priority assignment, I personally would think this is a 1. Obviously, we as a board have to decide what we think about it.
Yeah, and what I was gonna say, this project looks different now than it did a year ago
Yeah.
because we're taking care of 3 items.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, we've got SAU coming up, that's a small amount, for some retro to an existing building. But like I explained earlier, we went from 34 million for two of the issues to 9 million for 3. So just remember that on, it kind of changes priorities just because it's grouped into a one project, one bond.
Yeah, and I
Because-
think that because it affects the getting out of the district office location, and that there's a time constraint on that,
Yeah.
that definitely increases the urgency for me.
Yeah, it's
And-
dependent on other projects.
And what I'm trying to say is this is just addressing full day. It isn't really addressing space needs, which fixes that at the same time. But it puts district office out of a lease for them, so you could almost have all 3 graded under this one.
Yeah.
Because breaking them up isn't doing it justice for the
Yeah.
prioritizing, is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get at. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? If you looked at it as a package, which we are, we're doing one bond
Yep.
of 9 million for 3 projects, it almost should be graded that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, for the CIP.
So you're saying kind of combine the full day K and SAU project into.
It's one
that's it,
bond.
right?
It's gonna show up as one bond,
it's like-
so why would we grade it? The next
Differently.
one is the SAU at the 1.7 million and this at 7.5.
Yeah.
Or 7.2, whatever it is. That's what I'm getting at. It kinda,
We can't combine them for our purposes tonight, but, right, I'm asking?
I'm not sure. That's what do you think? Where it's one bond now, it's one package to take care of the 3 issues. Should it be one grading for that bond item? Because that's basically what
Well, you're
this
gonna,
is.
that's how you're gonna ask for it, as
Yep,
one,
one.
so.
It should be done all
Should be
together,
combined.
correct? The grading and the priority.
So this evaluation criteria that we're just talking about, we should be having that conversation about both projects combined.
Yeah.
That's the way I think it's fair to the public too.
I mean, that's the way I feel like I'm, in my head, that's how
Right.
I'm doing it.
And then that's definitely in my head how I'm treating that CIP priority assignment at the bottom, the urgency.
Yeah.
But I think when we just came up with those committee scores for the evaluation criteria, we were looking at just the kindergarten change.
Correct. But it's one
So
bond.
let's look at it. I mean, yeah, I think it makes sense. One bond, one bond to solve what,
Yeah.
to your point, Bob, 3 needs.
Correct. Yep.
Space needs in Moose Hill, which
Yep.
is completely,
Correct.
by moving.
It'd be different if
kindergarten
if the school was doing 2 separate projects.
Right.
This year and next year, or 2 separate
Right,
bonds,
these are-
then we should grade it
Yeah.
so the people would understand how we came up with it. And that would show the prioritized too.
Yep.
In that, but it is one project.
Okay.
Should we make it 1 on this?
Yeah, I think
I think, and you guys did this last year.
I was
I
gonna
think.
say, this happened
You
either
had
a
it
year or
phased
2
out.
we
ago.
did.
We did.
Right, you ended up combining it, I think, at this meeting,
We did because
Yeah.
of the space needs.
Yeah.
We did one bond to
Yeah.
take care of that issue
yeah, and we
in full
condensed
day
it to
K.
one CIP project.
Yep, now we have 3.
Right,
The SAU is back in this year
Yep.
with the space needs and full day.
yep,
So I think for clarity, I think the one grading for the one project is more simpler and more
Yeah,
explicit.
yeah. so, hold on one
So,
sec.
So if you
Kelly,
want-
would you be able to, okay, yeah, I was just gonna ask you to go to the all projects.
Yeah, so this is, you could grade each one, right? And then you could take an average, or you can do it as one giant.
What if we think about it as one project and
And
grade
grade
it and then apply whatever grades we gave to the other screen as well? You follow me? Like whatever, we can work on this full day K page and grade it with both projects in mind and then put a matching score on the SAU project and you can combine them at a later date.
I'd just delete,
I'd just delete it.
I'd just delete it. Kelly, make line 4 at leap space
Put that
needs
total up
full
on-
day K in 3 neighborhoods and SAU project and a total cost of $9,104,120. Or,
Actually, the cost of, not to complicate things even more, line 4, Amity, what's the
that, I
updated cost
based
there?
it off of what she had said was
Was it
7.4.
7.4?
I think it was 7.4 you said was what I just
Nine.
based that 9.1.
50,000 even.
Okay. Yeah, combine them.
That's fair.
Well, do you wanna do one thing at a time? Or you finish grading it and then I'll update the whole
You'll
spreadsheet?
update it.
Yeah.
What, you can't do 3 things at the
Let's
same
do
time?
one thing at a time.
So you wanna go back and just make sure the numbers are the same,
Yeah.
thinking of all 3?
Good on this?
Okay, so now if we're looking,
I'd bring long-term cost savings up a little bit.
Yep.
Maybe do a 4.
Yeah, certainly when you're thinking about getting rid of that lease.
Yeah.
On their recommendation, on the department score for the SAU project, they had a 1 under the first category, addresses of emergency, public safety, and school safety. Want to explain that a little bit? How the department came up with a 1 for that? How did the SAU project have a 1 for that category, whereas?
I think you discussed a little bit of
Don't remember, to tell you the truth.
having administration in a more centralized area, to giving the administration the ability to get the 4 of the 6 schools in a
more timely.
more timely fashion.
Well,
In
there
the,
was
I
a-
think you even said in the event that
Yeah, having
something's
the staff
happened.
back on campus,
Yeah.
centrally located, could
Yeah.
get to all 4 buildings in minutes,
Yeah,
and the other buildings within 10 minutes rather than 20 minutes across town.
I think that bumps it up to a 1 on safety.
That's fair.
Addresses the deficiency. I think,
We're still 5.
Yeah.
That's 5.
And I say we're still 5 for provides
Yep.
capacity.
5.
4.
long-term savings for sports job development, increased tax base.
I think we're still, what do we
Yeah,
go with
that's-
on our full day K-Rec?
We had 4,
Four.
we had just changed it to 4, and this was a 5. This is a huge savings compared to that project at 5 million, now at about 1.6 million.
So I think we're still at least 4 on the non-property tax revenues.
Did you agree on 5 or 4 for the long term? 5?
I think a 4.
No, 4.
That's fine.
Matching funds available for limited times, 0. Is it just, so with matching funds, we've obviously done our due diligence and research and,
Yep.
and we've,
On
There's
this
nothing.
whole project, yes.
for both, okay.
So we come up with a combined score of 23 for the 2 projects.
Urgency's 1.
Yep.
In my opinion. Everyone good?
Yes, urgency is 1.
I would say this would be the only thing that would change. If these were 2 separate projects, I could see the SAU being a 2, just because theoretically it's a couple years out anyway.
What's that?
I-
The
I
SAU.
was saying if we were still grading these separately,
Mhm.
I could see the SAU being put as a 2, just because it's needed within 3 years, and the plan is to have it in about 3
In
years, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, just over 2 years.
So that would really be the only thing that would change, but obviously the project as a whole, I think one is more appropriate for,
Because you have to get the kindergarten done in order to
in
accommodate
order to do the SAU, which is 2.5, 3 years out.
Okay. Are we good with the
Well,
SAU and
what
full
was
day
that
care?
number, 22?
22.
22.
Where'd you land? 22?
23.
23, Mr. Chair.
What'd you have for
22 was
these three?
for the other one, I believe.
Sorry, it was 23.
So, 3,
So one,
That was a 4 on supports increased tax base or whatever. And then that was a 4 as well. Brought us to
There you go.
23.
That's because of the one, yeah.
None of this requires a vote, right?
No.
no, this is going to be presented to the planning board, who's going to hold a public hearing and then adopt it.
and really, I should add too, the planning board will decide if the 3 projects should be combined in the document.
Right.
But we'll bring it forward to them as your suggestion.
As a suggestion to combine.
So I do think it's good that you go through each.
So then,
One
should the committee
individually.
score be
Gotcha.
2 for that? Or still sending to the planning board? as
Oh, I
4
see what
separate
you're
units?
saying. So you're saying leave it as 4, recommend it to the planning board to change it to 3 projects as opposed to 4 projects? Or take
I'm-
2 projects and make it
Yeah.
1. You're saying leave that to the planning board.
Well, I'm saying,
We just,
leave it to the, I'm saying go through each sheet to score it.
Yep.
By individual project.
Okay.
And then suggest that the planning board combine the school into one.
Okay.
And
I
then,
like your
Well-
suggestion of making it a 2 then.
Yeah.
Combine full day K and the SAU project into one
At the
project,
plan-
and the
at
high school is a
planning board
separate.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
so where are you at for high school?
Okay, so we're on to high school. So wait, so final answer there, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair. We put the full day K as a 1 for priority assignment and the SAU project as a 2 for priority assignment, yes?
And then we had was it a 22 on the original LEAP space needs and a 23 on the SAU?
Moving on to high school. Okay, so the district addresses an emergency public safety or school safety need.
I would say that's a 5.
Because of the,
Because of the basketball court, right? Or like, so let's clarify that just really quickly.
because of wood construction in that part, in the oldest part of the high school,
Yeah.
which is a
Is all-
fire safety hazard.
Yeah.
And that's what's driving the 5, yes?
the 100s, the oldest part of the building.
That makes sense to me.
Addresses a deficiency in service or facility. 5 was the department score for the district.
I also agree with that. I mean, that 100 portion of the high school is a deficiency. And not having an auditorium, in my opinion, is a deficiency.
Yeah, but I don't know that that's part of,
No, that's not part of that calculation?
no, this 116 million is,
But-
well, that is really
It
part of the
is,
big,
Yeah,
yeah.
it is, but
Yeah.
that is deficiency in education.
Yep.
And it's certainly it's a service that we're not
Some people.
meeting. It doesn't, the quality of our music program is sort of at a juxtaposition to the services to the facilities that they have.
Okay. We comfortable with that?
Provides capacity needed to serve existing population or future growth. 3.
That could be a 2 at
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah, I don't know that, yeah,
I kind of agree. It's not really a change in capacity.
No, and we have
No.
space in that building for growth.
to move around, yeah,
We do,
yep.
which we're working on.
Long-term cost savings, yeah, you're gonna have a more efficient building, obviously. So I think a 3 is fair.
And I think you're also going to get income from the auditorium because other groups in the area will use it, will rent that space out to some degree.
Yeah, I don't know that that'll
I think
help a little,
that's-
but I don't know that that'll give us much on savings other than, you know, having it for our community more than
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah,
So
because we're no longer renting out a
that's right.
facility.
It's a
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah,
people have helped us out in other districts for events, and
yeah,
we could be doing the same for others. So
Yep.
Okay.
I don't think there's
Yeah.
any, I don't think there's really any long-term cost
Yeah,
savings at
there's
this
really,
point.
right, and there's not really kind of like a business justification plan to kind of even,
So is 3 too high a number for that?
I think so.
yeah.
You know, when we come back, when it comes back to this committee,
next year.
a year or 2 years, it may start to move up, but I don't
Right.
think it's there
So
right now,
the long-term cost savings should be at 2.
if that.
Yeah, I think two is really where it should be at.
Supports job development and increased tax base.
I mean, it would, obviously, it's gonna support a tax base. I don't know necessarily about job development, but I think a 3 is appropriate.
Yeah,
Go
I do
three.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
good.
Leverages the, oh, go ahead.
No good? I was saying,
Oh,
okay,
sorry. Leverages property tax revenue.
0.
0. Because this wouldn't be adding space for students, like adding classrooms.
Correct.
Yeah.
And matching funds are,
There, yes,
God
due to
bless.
safety issues, there will be matching funds available, and we're far enough, it'll be far enough out where we can, you've got to put in for it 2 to 3 years ahead of time
okay,
for matching funds on a project, so it gives, once a committee
So there's
starts,
some
then you can
potential there.
start filing paperwork federally and statewide.
Okay.
CIP, I think it realistically, probably 4 to 6 years.
Put that at a 4.
I did.
Yeah, is 3.5 an option?
Was good.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Oh, I was talking to Kelly about
Oh.
up top.
Oh.
So, yeah, so we have desirable, needed within
Yeah,
4 to
3.
6.
It could even be a 3.
Deferrable can be placed on hold until after 6 years. It's, I think,
I like the 3.5 option.
yeah.
It kind of falls in the
There,
middle
there's-
for me.
Yeah.
there really is a lot of planning and a lot of
There
kind
is,
of,
Yeah.
that
years.
has to be
Yeah.
kind of,
Give it-
it's so seeing,
I think 4 is actually might be appropriate for it.
I think what what we're saying is this is an important project, but we're not there yet.
Correct.
Yeah.
And we may
I
not
don't like
get
the
there.
word on hold for 4 because we're not trying to put it on hold. It's just not something that
I agree.
is.
Right.
So yeah, the 3 really is probably appropriate for
Yeah,
it.
Yeah.
3.5, but
Yeah.
let's go 3.
Everybody like that 3.5 idea.
But yeah, I mean, just to, this is an advisory document to kind of show the community, show the respective, governing boards, what's on the roadmap. I'm definitely fair with that.
3?
3. All right, DPW. So,
I'd say a 5. I'd say a 5 on that.
Absolutely.
5, yeah.
Not just public safety, but employee safety.
addresses a deficiency in service or facility, I believe
I
that
think
is
that's
a
a
5.
5.
Yep, certainly.
5.
Yep.
Agreed.
Long-term cost savings, I
Yeah,
think that's
that's
more
a-
of a 5,
I
to
think
be
that's a
honest with you.
From what we know, I think that
Yeah.
is correct, 5.
Vehicles.
Saving the vehicles.
Vehicles,
yeah,
15
yeah.
years.
From 10 years to 15
Yeah.
years is a big,
So-
that's a big number.
Not to be the naysayer on that point of
No,
view.
please.
But, for $30 million, you could replace the fleet almost 10 times over at $250,000 per vehicle.
What are they gonna be in 6 years?
I agree with you, but I'm saying, even if
Yeah.
that number's blown out of proportion and you can only replace the fleet 5 times over, I think the argument that there's cost savings has some holes in it, sorry, Dave. I totally think this project is warranted and we should do it, I just don't know if that's a 5.
All right.
More information for cost savings will
Yeah.
come in future CIP.
That's why I didn't score it a 5, because the numbers that again, the numbers that we're presenting are highly inflated, not knowing where it was gonna be plugged into CIP. So we used some pretty grand escalating clauses
Okay.
and knowing to what extent of the first phase do we complete even too. It's hard to, and is there a
Okay.
Could we
Talked me
bump
out of
it
a
down
five,
to a
Dave. I was gonna give you a 5. You talked me out of it. Give him a 4.
Yeah,
Four
a
sounds
4 is
reasonable.
fair, Mr.
There is
Chair.
cost savings.
There is.
Yeah.
For what we know today, I think a 4 is fair.
All right. I was gonna suggest 3 until we kind of like start to really kind of formulate the plan and kind of give Dave some more book reports to do. But I'm fine with 4. Supports job development and increased tax base.
Well, I think it supports the job development.
Yeah.
I'm not, the increased tax base, I'm not, but, the facility,
It's
I'm
I
gonna
would,
tell you if-
yeah, it's indirectly supporting the tax base,
correct.
you know?
So I would give that a 3.
I'd give it a 3 too.
I think a 3 is fair, Mr. Chair.
That sounds good.
Leverages the non-property tax revenue.
No.
I don't think there's anything there.
0 or 1.
Yeah, 0.
Matching funds available for a limited time.
You're only talking about matching funds if they're solar, right?
Yeah, in hindsight, I think I might have scored that probably a little high, because of there's only so many things that we can target on matching funding there.
I just don't see it. I'd maybe put it at a 1 because there's something.
But yeah, I think 1 is.
There is some money, especially around the petroleum and stuff like that, and then the solar and what have you, and depending on the type of heating systems that we do, if their efficiency units and things of that nature, there's some money to be definitely utilized there, but,
No environmental money out there, huh?
well, the site is not a Superfund site anymore. Right. So, no,
Give it a 1.
which is a good thing, Patrick.
Yeah, I'd
We
say
agree, absolutely, yes, of course. I'm just talking about your water runoff issues that you have. Would the state be
Well,
willing to give any money to
So
repair that?
that's our responsibility
Yeah.
to make sure that we're not doing that.
Okay,
So
Yeah.
they're not gonna incentivize you to do what you're supposed to be doing anyway.
I think that's good.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
and it's definitely a 1 for urgency, in my opinion.
Yeah, we agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
I would agree.
So 1, urgent, cannot be delayed, need immediate for health and safety for a CIP priority assignment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we have 2 1s, or do we have to rank them in order?
What do you want, a 1.5?
No, I know we have, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, we gave the kindergarten a
I'll put
1.
the decimal
and we
point,
gave-
right?
No, I think
We gave the high school a
don't need to
3.
rate them by, you don't have to put them
We're
in
not
order.
comparing them to one another. for
I'm
sure.
gonna,
Correct.
No.
I'm comfortable with a 2. I think there's more plan to the plan that needs to kind of develop here. Needed within 3 years. It's not we're not throwing this on the ballot this year. There's planning that has to occur when this gets brought to us again next year, which I'm assuming it will. Then we can make that assignment. But this is basically telling these governing boards that
This is coming.
this is coming in the next 3 years. Be ready.
But is that what
But,
this?
but I think it's urgent.
Yeah,
I think
it
if
is
you drop
urgent,
it
yeah.
down,
Yeah.
So,
people tend to back off for you, oh, we got time. If they look at that number as a planning board and say, oh, they said it's a 2, it's needed within 3 years, we got another year.
Yeah, just because we're not ready to do it now.
It's
doesn't mean
urgent,
it's
but
not.
I
that
guess
gets
what
the
hel-
committee going.
What gets me is needed within 3 years to maintain basic level of community services.
Yeah,
I don't think they're gonna be able to maintain basic level of community services in a year, never mind 3.
It's a struggle,
You know,
yeah.
nothing against the department, just the growth
Right.
of the town.
no, I just prefer to rise to the occasion to speak a little bit in my thoughtfulness here. I have no.
You only have 45 minutes.
Yeah, I know. I have no problem. I have
That
no
was
problem.
4-2-5,
I have no
right?
problem with whichever way you want to rank it. I've had very candid conversations with Bob and whatnot, and I understand that, we're probably both a 1, but in the eyes of the community and what is needed most in the eyes of the community, I would side with the school district at this point.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to educating your children and the fact that they're up against the wall on a rental unit for the SAU and other challenges that the school district has even in larger scale down the road, looking at the high school requests, that I definitively see is needed. You know, I'd like to see the school succeed at trying to get some of their, you know, hurdles out of the way in the more near future. That being said, once they're up and going on that, then that is perhaps when, you know, the town side could then come in behind it. We'll be a little bit further along in our process, at least in public relations and campaigning for it and whatnot, and educating the public on the need. And then that would be the appropriate time for us, for the DPW to come forward. I mean, we're already in dire straits down there.
Yeah.
What's a few more years to be in that condition anyway? I say that, you know, with all due respect. I mean,
In my opinion, I see it. Yeah, absolutely. The building is falling by the waysides. Conceptually, I see the improvements and everything that kind of comes with that. One member of the committee, I just probably want to see a little bit more. We've done a lot of planning, so it's not a fair statement that you have done a lot of homework and a lot of planning here. It's not going to be on the ballot this year.
No.
We have another bond that's definitely going to be on the ballot. I'm assuming. Gives us another year to kind of take the feedback, increase that. I also don't want kind of this list here to kind of be all ones as well. I kind of want to.
Mr. Chair, could I just give my 2 cents on it real quick?
Sure.
So I feel like what we're doing right now is, to Dave's point, I agree with Dave that the school district should come before this. However, that doesn't minimize the urgency needed behind this. And this CIP priority assignment is an assignment based off of project, not based off of list of projects in what order we feel as though they should be done. So while I totally agree, the urgency of this is still absolutely there.
Yeah.
Whether it happens this year, next year, or 5 years down the road, the urgency of it is today, just as, and unfortunately what we're seeing, and we've talked about it for a couple of years now, we have a whole bunch of urgent stuff because we haven't been able to do, or nobody has done anything for a very long time. So the whole kicking the can down the road thing has now shown up, and everything's urgent all of a sudden. So if this 1 to 6 was a list in which I felt as though these should be done, I would agree it should be behind the kindergarten. But this is not a list of how the project should go. It's a list of
Rating of need.
rating of the need for the project, and I do find this as an urgent need for the town of Londonderry, given the growth we've had, the growth we continue to have.
I agree with that.
Can I just jump in real
Go
quick?
ahead.
Because to Jake's point, these go to the planning department. They're gonna do their voting and prioritizing, and they're gonna give it to the council, and they're gonna give it to the school.
Yeah,
So
and
now the council gets it and sees DPW went through the CIP, went through planning board, has rated it a 1. Now they give Dave some guidance, or Dave can now start his process.
Yeah.
Because it's urgent.
Yeah.
If it's 3 years down the road, they might say, hold off a year. And I think the planning, to Dave's point, what he presented tonight, is a 2 to 3 year plan, but now the council can give him direction in his department to start going forward with that plan.
beginning to execute
With an
that.
urgent
Yeah.
instead of necessary.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at, as far as a 1. It's not the ranking of project, what goes on the bond this year, or in order, but I think it's giving the council the answers that we've come up with, that you need to release the department to move forward in the planning process, because it's urgent.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
It's kind of separate, but all in the same. Exit 4A, who's going to take care of that in the winter?
Well, that's a
You were
good,
told last night
well-
you are.
yeah, well, there's been some discussions about who's doing what, and I think it's a few years down the road to kind of iron that all out, but,
I don't want to get super off topic.
yeah, but,
Back to
but yeah, I
urgency
think
then.
that's in development.
I would concur with both
part
of
of
you.
CIP.
I think if you send it to the town council with a 2, it's gonna get put off.
It gets
So
on-
I think
goes
it
on
needs
the
to be a
shelf.
1.
It goes
because
So
on
is
Yeah,
everyone,
I-
is everyone in agreement to put it in a 1?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
I am, yes.
Yeah, and that does help me to an extent that where I have struggled with is because, again, you know, when you do these studies, if you will, you know, you come up with very vague numbers, and they, you know, engineers, you know, Dan's not in the room anymore, so I can talk trash about him now, but but they, you know, they want to come up with numbers that don't end up, you know, they'd rather shoot higher than under, you know, and say, well, you said it was 10 million, and then they bid it out and it comes back at 15 million. Not a good look. So the question becomes, you know, do we, you know, ask for funding to do the actual engineering of the site, the building, and get actual bid spec documents and everything ready to go so that you can then actually get real, firm, concrete numbers to go on the ballot, which is a very good way of doing things. You know, in my profession, we shifted to that type of, you know, analysis, if you will, many years ago, and then you limit your cost overruns, and, you know, your project doesn't end up in the hole and whatnot, because you have real firm numbers when you're putting them on the ballot. And in buildings these days, that's tough. It's really tough to narrow down where project costs are gonna be out 18 months, 2 years. So, but that being said, to get that hurdle out of the way, you're looking at a few $1 million. So you ask, you know, for a warrant article for a few $1 million to do the surveying, the engineering, the design, and all of that work, which does take a good year on a project of this magnitude. And then what happens if the people don't want to build a building after that,
Yeah.
or
So
commit to it? So
ultimately,
it's a
you know,
toss-up.
this- Right.
So,
yeah.
but that's a planning decision that the boards will have to decide.
Right, so this is definitely kind of, obviously, it's an advisory document. They'll go to the town council and they'll kind of look at that and basically say, okay, let's have a
Right.
further discussion on this.
Right.
What's our plan to kind of, you know,
So to,
to
so
upgrade
to the point, of
this.
leaving it at 1, I can now have
Exactly.
that discussion with the council.
no, it was a good conversation.
Because the same thing would happen, like, when we get to the high school, that's gonna take a couple of years of planning, it's probably gonna take a boatload of money to do
Yep.
all
Just
the
even,
architectural,
Yeah.
engineering and architects. We didn't do it on this project because it's so small, but when you get to that magnitude of a project like Dave's, you want to get the engineering done, so you have a set of drawings that you can bid and get that hard number for bond,
correct.
so.
Okay, so that is, any other comments or discussion on the ranking and prioritization?
I don't believe so, Mr. Chair.
Good.
Kelly, you're good?
All set?
All right, other business? I do want to kind of just say that we'll probably look to kind of review some of our, yeah, kind of where we want to kind of take CIP in the future. So just want to kind of like I'll probably look at you guys to, you know, this group here to, you know, assist with that planning. So I just wanted, from other business, we may have, you know, some other kind of meetings that, you know, will come up to really, how do we make this a more
As efficient as
as
possible.
efficient as possible, value add to the community, value add to the boards that, you know, kind of sponsor our membership, and frankly, value add to, you know, the town and its residents, so.
Yeah, is that something that you would be interested in talking with the council? Because as far as the charter goes, that would be a change.
Yep.
As it is now, I've been on it for 3 years, we don't really follow all of the guidelines, so I think looking at this where it's more efficient and it does the job that the community needs as a whole.
Yep.
And then the plan is, once elections are done, and the liaisons are picked, an early meeting up front is done, and then you can plan your meetings out, series over the course of when your kickoff, and that is,
Like, even if you, even, Bobby, even if you look at, like, this evening, Dave had
Right.
a consultant, and, you know,
Right.
has that, Dave had, that presentation was probably happened at the council level as well. So there could be an opportunity for the
Yep.
CIP committee to kind of, I'm just looking at ways to be efficient.
absolutely,
Not,
just to have a meeting to have a meeting.
have a meeting to have a meeting, but
Right.
also, also, we don't want M&E to kind of present the same thing 5 different times to
Sure.
5 different groups.
I agree.
Especially if we have the opportunity to kind of, have a joint meetings when capital projects potentially could be addressed. So, Dave,
Good.
are you good?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I have not presented that to the town council yet.
Okay,
So this
sounds
is the
good.
first,
Sorry about
first
that.
brush at it, and that way, now that we know where the ranking is, that preempts more longer in-depth presentations and
Exactly.
discussion.
And, with those, these, when these projects do come to light to the respective boards, it may be kind of beneficial to have us there. I don't know what it looks like. Bob, I think you're kind of, you're right there with kind of, addressing, kind of, a change, there. I think Jake, from a planning board standpoint,
Yeah,
we
oh,
might want to kind of
absolutely.
look at it that way.
Absolutely.
But, know that, we definitely want to, my role as chair is to ensure that, everyone's value in this room is maximized.
Correct.
So,
Yep.
And I feel if I continue to talk, that value declines, so.
Not at all. I think it's good. I think just if a better format is developed
Yeah.
Yep.
in that, that a kickoff meeting might be end of April,
Yep.
first meeting is July, next follow-up is August, September to finalize, whatever it may be, or August finalize, go to planning board September. I think if there's a format,
Some
part of the
joint meetings
charter,
to
in
kind of-
that month range, and what should be tasked at each meeting. You can do it with 3 or 4 meetings. I think it says up to 6. It was 12 at one point, reading the charter. And thank you, who posted it for us out there. I think Glenn posted it, the charter, which I had never really looked at.
Right,
So
yeah,
I think it's
and Glenn,
important.
thank you for that, actually.
And we can get maximized, to your point, Jeff, in those meetings and
Get
get
the
them done and
Best
give
use of-
everybody
Best use of the time.
what meeting
Yeah.
is better for you to present.
Yeah.
Even if we had to break them up, there could be a better structured format, and that, so we don't get to a point where it's later in the year because of so many things that may have happened
Right.
in town, to get us this late in the game here.
Exactly, and I do want to kind of also, the administrative aspect, I mean, the
Yeah.
CIP meeting, report it's a significant document. And I'm sure everyone is up to speed and has read the last 6 years of the, many pages,
25.
There's appendices.
22. It's only 22 pages, it's not that much. I was thinking it was like this.
120.
But still, it's it's definitely an administrative kind of document. So we want to definitely get the information out, have it available, have it usable.
Yeah.
As well. So I think more to come. I think that's a good opportunity for us to kind of invest in the town.
Sure.
Wonderful.
Sounds good.
Anything else?
Good.
I'm good, Mr. Chair.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I?
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.